right before the break, if you can let them give them the head. And then, let her kind of think about panel. We do have some free or already, people have already set up one, so we have one set up. I'll let them turn over to Samantha. Thanks, Sam.
Good morning, everybody. Are you awake?
Oh, yeah.
Is everybody bright-eyed and bushy-tailed? Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about permitting. Oh, yay! I got a few excited individuals. If you have a clicker in front of you, you are in the right room. If you don't see a clicker, you need to go throw your hand up, and someone will bring you one. Does everybody have a clicker? Does everybody know what a clicker is? A little white thing in front of you with buttons. All right. We're going to be using Turning Point again today, so this is familiar. Hopefully you guys are getting very used to this tool that we like to keep you awake and keep you engaged with, so no one's snoring in the back row. I did warn someone I might throw things if you fall asleep, so just FYI. This is not an easy subject to make exciting. I will be honest with you. Permitting is kind of dry. It's kind of loaded with rule requirements. It's loaded with all of the stuff that isn't the most fun part of our job. I'll be honest with you. This is not my favorite part of the job. But it is a necessary and important part of the job, and we need to be able to do it right. And so when we have these permitting presentations, I typically see them given from the perspective of looking at an application and filling out an application. Well, this one I'm going to turn. I'm going to flip it and look at it from the perspective of our checklist and reviewing an application from our checklist, not looking at filling out an application, but looking at how we would view it in the role of a permit reviewer or a permit writer. So it's a little different. It might not work. It might be a little dry, but I figured let's give it a try and let's see if it helps maybe frame some perspective for a lot of the things that have been discussed already at this conference. You'll probably hear reiterated in this presentation. Some of the changes with the MMP stuff, some of these other topics that have been shifting a little bit, you might hear reiterated in this presentation. And I really want to make sure that those are clear and that those are well understood. So if you do have questions, please wait for a pause or a break, and we'll try to get to your questions. And I really want to be repeating your questions, so if I don't repeat your question, please remind me, because as you can see, I am recording on WebEx, so this presentation will be recorded for future viewing and future training purposes. We're going to pilot this a little bit to see if some of this training that we do at Maxwell at different events can be captured and utilized again at a different date or a different time, or for new CFOs when they first step on the job, we can say, here's 5 videos we'd like you to watch. And then they can watch these at their own pace, at their own time, and go back to them if they need to. So we're giving it a whirl, so I have to repeat your question if the WebEx is going to make sense for people in the future. So, and also please note that if your question is adversarial or something case specific, I would appreciate it if you would maybe approach me afterwards, and I'd be more than happy to talk about. But while I'm recording, I'd like to try to keep us on task and addressing the things that we see in the application or in the checklist. All right, with that being said, we're going to move forward. So this is my disclaimer, blah, blah, blah. Everybody here brings different things to the table. Everybody brings different perspectives, different levels of experience. Some of you may issue 20 permits in a year. Some of you may issue none. But it's all still part of the job we do. And so this is just my little blurb about that. All right, so your first turning point question So get your clickers out. This is like kind of a demographic question for me. How many permits do you issue in a calendar year? And this isn't your, I'm not going to follow up on this. This is just approximately. So I can kind of illustrate the range of people we have in the audience. So polling is open. So also the first question when you use Turning Point is always the good question to get the number of how many clickers are out there. So I can kind of get an idea of how long I have to talk in between and how long I have to wait. And it looks like we got about 49 responses. So that's probably our magic number. And so you can see the range that I was talking about. Richard, can we turn the lights down a little bit right here just to help see that a hair better? So we can see that well, it thought I was entering dates. Isn't that funny? 5 January. 1 to 5, so about 38% of you are falling in that category. Where if you're only issuing 5 permits a year, it can get a little tough to come back and try to remember everything that you're supposed to do when you're issuing a permit. The 20 or more, there are about 16% of you falling into that category. So it gives us this idea, or pardon me, 6% of you falling into that category. And so those of you that are permitting often and on a regular basis are probably not the majority in the room. All right, permits, this is what we're going to cover. Construction short form, interim, why do we do them, where does it come from in the rule, considerations prior to permitting, technical review, that's where we're going to use the checklist. If you don't have a checklist and you want to follow along or make notes or scratch on it, definitely raise your hand and we'll make sure you get one of those. Okay, CSF permits. This is CSF's construction short form permit. This is probably very familiar to almost all of you. This reference is just to the rule. It's just meant to ground us in where we issue these and why we issue these. Also, we have to keep in mind that when we're entering a permitting a site with a construction short form permit, we want to make sure that we are issuing them the correct permit. Are they really constructing and expanding, or do they have an existing pollution hazard on site that needs to be addressed? And so that's just kind of why I threw the rule up there, is to remind us that we need to make sure that there is an existing pollution hazard at the sites we're permitting with a construction short form permit. And so right in the rule it says, however, if a facility is determined, as I like this phrase, to be a pollution hazard, and the owner is proposing to expand, we have to fix the problem first. And an interim permit would then be the appropriate tool. So then, interim permits, facilities identified as a pollution hazard, or 300 or more animal units prior to applying manure in these areas. That second part gets lost a lot, don't you guys think? Number 2. I don't know if that's an area that we have trained much on or that we talk about much, but when they're over 300 animal units and they're on land where we're having those soil phosphorus test levels higher than that part of the rule, and you know, my rule book is looking pretty rough these days. Hopefully the new ones come out soon. But you know, we need to be looking in here and checking that information to see if we're dealing with a site, especially even with the construction short form with your manure management plans when you're reviewing those. Don't forget about this part of the rule. And then the other part, D, an owner issued an interim permit that authorized construction shall not stop the expansion until they fulfill other permit conditions. So that's also directly in the rule. So these are coming right out of 7020. All right, another question for you. Let's keep you engaged. What is the duration of a construction short form permit when an extension has been requested and should be approved, has been requested and approved? So you guys get to tell me if you think it's 24 months, 24 months and 90 days, 3 years, or 4 years. See what you think the answer is. We're up to 43. I'm looking for the magic 49. And we'll close polling. Was it 50 last time? Just under the wire. All right. We'll see. All right. Okay, so 24 months and 90 days is 52%. The correct answer, and this is a construction short form permit, is actually 4 years. And so this one, I kind of worded it on purpose to try to trick you. The 24 months and 90 days is for an interim permit. The construction short-form permit is a 2-year permit with a potential extension of another 24 months. NOPA says, what is the duration of a construction short-form permit in its entirety? So not just the extension. Huh? This is right out of your favorite book here. All right. So this is kind of the overview. I like these slides. We've used these before. You can see the construction short-form permit is applicable for the 300 to 999. Interim permit is the 50 to, so the site, that's that policy that we have that if you're required to register, then you can be required to obtain an interim permit. So purpose, construction short-form, new construction expansion, no pollution hazard. Interim permit, of course, there's a schedule of compliance, there's pollution hazards. They're both the notice of construction and/or public notice, dependent upon where they're falling in that size category. Duration, they're both 24 months, but remember with the interim permit, it can be less than 24 months. So if there's something that you're permitting them to do that you want to see done within that calendar year or within that crop year, you can reduce the duration of an interim permit. It does not always have to be for the full 24 months. Extension, this is where I caught you. Construction short form, 24-month extension above and beyond the life of the permit. So that construction short form can have a life of up to 4 years. The interim is only 2 years plus 90. Richard, would you please keep me on task with time too when we get close? Give me a warning. Tracy. The question was, and I'm repeating this so that we know, Tracy asked, let's say that this is an interim permit situation, I'm assuming. Let's say you issued it for a 7-month period of time, and they requested an extension due to weather conditions. You granted that said extension, so they got their 7 months plus 3 months, basically. And they still don't have it done. What do you do, right? Is that what you're asking? Can you grant more than 90 days? No. The permit has its life of 7 months with a potential extension for 90 days. After the permit expires, you have to consider other tools to continue working with that producer or continue him on the road to compliance, such as something we've seen as a letter of warning, a notice of violation, to continue him to finish his, or to get him to finish his project. Also, if they're working on cost share, that might be a little bit of an area that you can use some best professional judgment. You're jumping ahead of me with that one. Can you hold it for just a little bit? Okay, we'll get there. All right, the next one, stocking expansion. We have more on this later, so we'll come back to this. All right, so after permit issuance for a construction short form and after the pollution hazard is fixed for an interim permit. Inspections before, during, after. And permit closure letter with a construction short form is kind of discretionary. It's not something that's required. But with an interim permit, after they've done it, a closure letter can also be tied in with your inspection letter. These don't have to be separate letters. All right, permit applications. This is just, I kind of like the way this lays it out. Where you receive the permit, you date stamp it. And they commented, what was it, on Monday, that date stamping is being done widely across the board and done well. Complete the cursory review to make sure you have all the pieces and parts. We call that a components review within the agency, and then collect all other components of the application. Components such as the mineral management plan, project plan, the specs, and other submittals can only be written into the interim permit. With the construction short form permit, they should be submitted with the permit application. Okay, permit applications. Producer has submitted a construction short form and interim permit application. This is one that might be considered a little gray, and I'll just call it out and call it what it is. When assisting the producer in completing the application, I always have the producer do the writing. I don't want to ever be accused, and this might even go back to our discussion last night with the attorney, of that potential of me doing something to their application that they did not agree to or that they did not state that they wanted that on their application. So I make the producer write the application, even if I'm sitting next to them and going, all right, producer, let's, or Mr. Bob, let's fill out this part. And he'll write down his name, let's fill out this part. And I'll step them through the whole process if I need to, but I'm not doing the writing. And that's a comfort zone for me. I don't feel comfortable doing that for a producer due to the potential. It's not even that it's ever happened to me. It's just the potential that that's there, that I don't write on their applications. Unless maybe later on there's an issue, I call him and I say, you wrote down the number off by one number. Can I change it? Yes. And then I'll initial it and put per phone conversation with Bob 12-13-13, something like that. All right. Be sure they sign the application. You would be surprised how many times that last page can be forgotten. When they sign it, they're agreeing to all of the pieces and parts. And if there's an inspection statement or something like that on the application, I can't remember what's on that last page, but they're agreeing to that. Okay, common stumbling points, we've all seen this. They don't know the registration number. Animal numbers and animal unit calculation will mess up that permit application very quickly. Facility components, that is the toughest page of the application. Every single producer that's ever tried to do that on their own, unless they have 2 total confinement hog barns, it's usually, that they can usually get pretty straightforward. Unless I'm wrong, they might still not get that. Sensitive areas, knowing what those are in their farm. Site sketch, notification, signature, those are all just areas that we see common problems. Yes? So the question was, do they need just technically do they need the site sketch and the aerial photo, or can they utilize an aerial photo with the component numbers listed on the aerial photo? And I would say if you have an aerial photo and they've drawn out the matching components on the aerial photo and the sensitive features and the flow paths and all that good stuff, the wells, I would say that would meet the requirement in the permit application, unless there is some discrepancy. I can't see a reason why that wouldn't. It might be some language in the application that we can review. I think there is language in there. All right, so permit application, excuse me, coffee's not quite cutting it. In your initial cursory view, this is kind of covering that whole gap site thing, and Wayne touched on this on Monday when we did the FEMAT. But when you're looking at it for the first time, that should be something that pops up right away. Because you don't want to do a lot of work and then hand it over to the PCA. You just want to let PCA do that work if they have to do it. Don't spend a lot of time with the technical review if right away from the get-go you can say, this is a CAFO. I don't need to worry about you. I'm going to give you over to the PCA. And so that should be something like a first glance looking at it. And also keeping in mind that the gap sites have not gone away. That's still a CAFO threshold. And so you still need to be checking for those EPA thresholds, those numbers, the 55,000 turkeys, the 700 dairy cows, the 909 or 1,000 feeders, all of those funky gap numbers. Those are still going to be permitted by the agency. Those still need to go to your regional MPCA contact. Also, always checking for your EAW requirements, looking for those sensitive features, because it could very well fall into a sensitive feature and be a county permitted site. And so keep that in mind. And then I just reiterate, know your CAFO thresholds. And if you don't know them, print that sheet with them, post it in your office so you have a quick reference. Okay, speaking of CAFO thresholds, what is the CAFO threshold for turkeys? Greater than 5 pounds. Oh, come on, folks. This is always the difficult part in Turning Point Technologies, is to fill the space while you're waiting for everybody to answer their questions. But I can fill space. Not sure if that's good or a bad thing, right? So 74% of you, lo and behold, oops. Well, you got it right. Don't worry, we'll reopen polling here. Give me a second. So you got it right. 74% said 55,000, and that is the correct answer. And it's not, must not have a smiley face on this one for you guys, sorry. But that is the correct answer for our turkey sites. And I threw the greater than 5 pounds in there just to mess with you a little bit. With the EPA CAFO thresholds, it doesn't matter. It's 55,000 turkeys. It doesn't matter when you're looking at an EPA CAFO threshold. Okay, what is the CAFO threshold for swine? And of course, I did add that these are separated. We're talking about not nursery. Well, not the baby pigs by. And we're almost there. 20, wow, that's good. 84%. So you guys are, this tells me that, well, and this isn't all of them, but your CAFO thresholds are familiar to you. You know them, you're looking at them. That's always a good thing. Okay, so this is the fun part, and this is where some of this I'm going to go through kind of fast. If there's something specific that you want me to talk about, we'll slow down, and I'll try to talk about it to the best of my ability for you. And this, we talked about checklists and utilizing those, and some of you may do like your technical review and then fill out the checklist as like a, second thought or afterthought. These are kind of long, but they are nice because they do cover everything that you're going to need for your technical review. Other components, your manure management plan checklist, your plans and specs. I believe we have a concrete LMSA checklist, and then as far, other potentials are still out there with the possibility of being released for other liquid manure storage areas. So, permit application checklist. And this is kind of where I took a gamble and going through it this way and breaking it down. And where I got the idea too is when we went through an inspection checklist, I always explain to the producer, a lot of times at the end when I'm talking, I always use it for the records, and I'll explain why I'm asking these questions or what the questions are, and the producers tend to like that. So I figured, what the heck, we'll try it with CFOs. All right, so the first part, you can follow along on your checklist, or maybe it'll help generate questions for you that you want to ask or something that doesn't make sense. This is the checklist that I utilize when I'm doing permitting in the undelegated counties with construction short forms and or interim permits. The first part is pretty self-explanatory, names and addresses. If it's an LLP, please make sure that you are getting a list of the owners. That's something that can be overlooked pretty easily. The LLP is the only one that we are looking for that on. Legal name and address, facility contact information, the preferred mailing, the location. You'd be surprised how many permit applications that I see that their location is wrong. So double check that. Look at your plat books. You guys probably have better access to that information than even PCA does with your tax data and your parcel data and all that good stuff. But look at what the producer put on that application, because a lot of times it's not correct. And then this data is also can be utilized to go into Delta for location information. So checking this is really important to make sure that we have good data. All right, reasons, and I tweaked this a little bit from the one that I had before. This used that number 7 and 7A used to say like E-Link, but we no longer have E-Link, so I tweaked this. This hasn't quite been officially approved yet, but I thought it made sense to me that has registration been updated, well, it's kind of worded funny, has the registration update been completed in Delta? And this, you can highlight. We had this discussion yesterday or the day before, and I brought up the fact, what if it's just an application? It's not built, it's not concrete yet, it's not something that's actually there. Well, run a highlighter across this on your checklist, and then you can utilize that as a tool to make sure you come back and get the registration completed when you issue the permit. My permit packets always have all of these pieces together. They have the application, they have the M&P, they have the plan and specs, they have my checklist, they have the incomplete letter, they have the complete letter. It's always together in a packet. So I know where I am in that process. I never have papers separated. They're always together. And also hub updates. Have there been hub updates? Does everybody remember what the hub is? What color is the arrow? Green. Yay, it's a green hub. A green arrow goes to the hub. And the hub updates are those things like names, addresses. Is the facility location wrong? If not, if it is, correct it. Is it wrong in Delta? Correct it. Is the phone numbers correct? People's phone numbers these days change like crazy. Cell phones, do we have a cell phone number? Is that the best way to reach this guy? Update that information and get the hub update done. Reason for permit application, that's self-explanatory. So when we're looking, the animal unit calculation is a spot that can easily be done incorrectly. So when you're going through this, you want to make sure that your column 3 or your animal numbers are matching what's at the site. And this is not a bad time to look back at registrations either. And in Delta, you can see historic registrations. So if you look at the last registration and your application from this guy says that he's already expanded by 100 animal units, and it wasn't on his last registration, those might be some red flags that you need to take into consideration when you receive a construction short form permit. Well, where did those 100 animal units go? Did he create a new open lot that I'm not even aware of? I need to get this rectified and figure out what's going on, because that registration should be a jumping off place for his expansion. Existing animal units. So the other piece in here is the EAW phased action piece. That's where I'd like to take a minute. It helps you through figuring out that phased action, because you write down the existing animal unit, the final animal unit, and the proposed increase. Down on the bottom, it has a place where you can figure out phased action. What was the last expansion or the size expansion in the last 3 years? Needed to be included. And then you can figure out the cumulative increase. So if they built, if they did that 100 animal unit increase, and you can go out and know it was done last year, whatever, you can figure out when he constructed, that would add into what he's proposing. And so, these things, you have to take a close look at them, because a phased action is that 3-year window. And we'll touch base on when that starts. Mandatory EAWs, you should be looking for those. 1,000 animal units or more increase, 500 animal units or more in sensitive areas. Sensitive areas include shoreland, delineated floodplain, designated wild and scenic river district, delineated DWISMAs. I believe the DWISMAs have to be vulnerable, though, if I remember correctly. And then, of course, certain karst features will trigger this. And if you're in a karst area, you're probably already more familiar with karst rule than myself. Okay, question. How is the limited period of time defined in regards to calculating animal numbers for phased action? So this is the EAW stuff. This is looking at that window of time. So the first option, is it 3 years from start of construction of one project to the date of application for the next? Or is it 3 years from the end of construction and start of construction for the next project? Or is it 3 years from the end of construction to the date of application? So this is kind of helping you focus and understand what that 3-year window is actually measuring. This is a little tricky, so read through that. We'll give you enough time to read those options. And to be honest with you, this is one I always have to look up myself. It's not one that pops into my head easy. I have to go back to the PowerPoint sometimes to be like, what was that? We're almost there. We got 47. And I'm going to wait for you stragglers. 50. Oh, wow, 51. Someone else voted. Yay. Okay, so, and whenever you see a slide like this, you know it's kind of like not 100% certain when you see this spread that's almost kind of not even, but across the board. So we got 49% that think it's A and 35% that think it's C. So those are our two big ones. And the A's have it. It's 3 years from the start of construction of one project to the date of application, because application is when you're reviewing it. That's when you're going to look and say, is this a phased action? So that's a good way to help you kind of think of that. So when they start construction, and they should be giving notification when they start construction, right? They should be letting you know. Always do. And when the application comes in, so keep that in mind. Facility components, everybody loves the components part of the application. And sitting down with a producer and trying to work this part out is so much fun. Typically what I do with this part with a farmer, this is just a little sidebar, I take an aerial photo that already has everything mapped out of what he has, and then it has the empty boxes for what he's proposing. And I say, we have to find a home for all your critters. And I set it down, and all the animals end up in a home. That is the easiest way for me to teach a farmer how to do the component sheet. So when we look at components, we need to make sure that we're not overthinking it, first of all. If you get stuck in the mud with, is that a 200-pound calf or a 500-pound calf? Stop that. Just work with the producer as what goes in that barn. So if you have a calf barn, you got a heifer lot, a dry cow lot, and your main dairy barn. Put that in it. This is not rocket science. If it's a calf barn and he says, I can put 200 calves in there, let's permit it for 200 calves, and I'll call them calves. I'm not going to try to flesh it out with them and say, well, when do they leave that barn? Well, they don't leave that barn to 700 pounds, so you might have some, it's a calf barn. We'll call them calves, we'll put them on there. I do want to permit it for the maximum capacity so that the farmer never gets in trouble with those numbers, with that size. So I want to permit it for those capacity and for what leaves that barn. And then the heifer lot, the same concept. Is it a bred heifer? All right, whatever. You're going to breed them at some point in time between the 700 and the, 900 range, somewhere in there. They're probably going to get bred. If not, they're going to go down the road. And so that's a heifer shed. Let's permit that for heifers. And so I try to keep it simple, keep it straightforward. Don't break it down. If the farmer starts giving you weights, correlate that. Make that correlation in your head. Try to keep it simple. Try to keep animals going to a house in each of these components. They have to have somewhere to live. What's the most that can fit in that house? With like beef operations, some of those other operations, we look at what the animals are leaving the facility at. So if this is a backgrounder, a beef operation that's backgrounding, I'm going to permit him for backgrounding. I'm not going to try to flesh out, okay, well, in this one they come in at 200 pounds, and this one they come in, you know, and they move over to this lot, and then they're 700 pounds. I'm going to permit the whole thing as backgrounders because that's when they leave the farm. Unless there's something case-by-case specific that would make me reconsider that concept. If he has a calf barn or a veal barn or something different. But if it's just an open lot, he's got 3 open lots, he's a backgrounding facility, I want to permit him for the maximum amount that's going to be there so that he never gets caught in a position where he's got, let's say that he has 1,000 and I permitted him for, I don't know, $999, $200 this, such and this. I just want to make sure that he is covered in that permit. So I want to make sure I'm permitting him for what his facility can hold if he were to max out. I guess that's my soapbox. Any questions on that stuff? All right. Yeah, go ahead.
It actually goes way back.
Yep.
But how many owners actually, like I know you're talking about this list of all these owners, but how many actually?
I accept one signature from one owner, but if I'm wrong, any PCA staff feel free to correct me. But I believe one signature of one of the owners is adequate on the permit application. However, if there are, let's say that there's two brothers and they're applying for a permit together, and I'm maybe not brothers, but well, we'll use brothers, and they're working together. They're not wanting to split this apart. They're not wanting to kind of mince words. I'll ask both of them to put their names on the application, even though only one of them may sign it. Then it's issued to both of them. Yes? The question was, what if they say they're only going to have 300 feeder cattle, but they have the capacity for 500? This can get a little tricky dependent upon the type of lot you're talking about. If you're talking about dirt lot, if you're talking about concrete lot, if you're talking about barns, and you know how far you can go to prove that the producer is off with his stocking densities, his capacity. Beef operations tend to go with feed bunk line, so you can check their feed bunk length and figure out if it makes sense or if he's just blowing smoke at you and you're going to have to call him on it. So you need to, before you say, well, you're wrong, you need to ask about management. How are you going to manage this? Why are you telling me you can only fit 300 in here? What is your square footage? What is your stocking density? I mean, I go through and ask a lot of those questions to try to flesh out why this may be an issue or why this may be a problem, that he wants to permit the site for 300 when I think it can hold 500. But I'm not the manager of that site. And so I really want to have my ducks in a row before I say, no, I disagree with you. So what Wayne said was, he said just, maybe I'll summarize it, get all the pieces of the information together. And if they're crossing major thresholds with capacity and size, you want to look at those and you want to make sure that you're not allowing them to do something where they're going to end up being a TAFO or end up being an NPDES site that's discharging. And so you don't want to set them up to fall into those categories if you can help it and if you can help them in the beginning. Wayne said, we allow them up to 14 months of storage. So if they're putting in 24 months of storage, that should be some red flags that you're like, wait a minute, man, this is not right. So liquid manure storage areas, new ones, you know, this is what it looks like. You could select the liner types, engineer plans the specs, who's the project engineer, did you do a checklist, did you forward it to MPCA for review? I know there are a few counties that do that. Or, you know, you can probably even put a note in here that you just called and asked a question even. Like, I reviewed it, but I wanted to double check this. And you can put a note in there. Existing ones, looking to make sure that they're permitted. Please do that. Most of you probably already do that. If not, they're going to have to make a choice on what they can do with an unpermitted basin. Open lots, you know, we kind of covered that yesterday, working through MinFarm, runoff control, but you need to be looking at these things. Manure stockpile, do they have them? Do they have short-term? Do they have permanent? Dead animal storage, how many of you, just raise your hand, ask about their mortality management, the mortality storage when you're on site? Good, because that may not necessarily be our key job as Board of Animal Health for day-to-day mortality management, but if there's a problem, a lot of times they're having a discharge or they're putting them in a place that's not environmentally sound for water quality purposes. So we do look at that from that perspective. Feed storage areas. So at not CAFOs, I have to switch my brain here every once in a while. When we're talking about non-CAFOs, they cannot be causing a pollution hazard, though they don't have to be 100% contained. And so if they're draining to an intermittent stream, you got a nice burn path of silage leachate all the way down, probably not something you want to be permitting. That would be a pollution hazard that would need to be corrected with an interim permit. Thank you. All right, milk house waste. How many of you have ever forgot about this on site at a dairy? You're looking at everything else, you find a major open lot problem, you're looking at this, you see dead animals, and you leave the site. This is one for me that I always have to, when I use the inspection checklist, I'm always like, oh yeah, I'll cover it with the farmer before I leave. That's my new like catch-all. Like before I leave, I'll pull out the inspection checklist and be like, we looked at this, and I'll answer any questions they have about it. Oh, we didn't look at this. Let's catch this on our way out. It's kind of my safety, so I don't have to carry my little checklist with the farmer as I'm walking around the farm and look like a dork. But at the end of it, I can go through it with the producer and make sure I didn't miss something like milk house waste. Soils, producers always write the funniest thing in the soil section on their applications. I see clay. Okay, let's elaborate on that. Is it really clay? Is it loam? So definitely pull up your soils maps and double check that. Or if you have borings, utilize the borings. They're in your plans and specs. They're right there in front of you. Sensitive areas, check your sensitive areas. Some of these is really easy. The producer always checks no, 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 no. Really easy to go, okay, no. Look, you guys have some of the best GIS tools available to you. Most of your counties have they make ours look pathetic sometimes when I see some of the stuff the counties have in regards to LIDAR, in regards to your layers. I mean, they're beautiful. Use them, look for this stuff. Most of these are pretty rare. State or federal wild or scenic rivers. What do we have in Minnesota of wild scenic rivers? I don't think there's a ton. There's a handful. Yep, Mississippi, St. Croix. So, I mean, most of you are aware if these are in your regions, in your counties, but check. Did you have a question? Did you have a question? Okay. Yes, dear. FEMA maps are like the oldest things in the world, though technically they're probably the place to go to find your floodplains. But check with your GIS people. They may have better layers of FEMA maps in their system already because of other zoning requirements and issues. Oh. Yeah, those maps need to be updated. One other thing, they just had a discussion about FEMA and maps and utilizing your IT and the LIDAR as a way to get a better idea where the floodplains lay. So with one question on the bottom here. It says, does the proposed project require an EAW based on these location restrictions? This is getting at that sensitive area piece again. Don't forget this. It asks you in 2 different spots about EAW stuff. So it's meant to trigger looking into that stuff. Yes, Paul? I don't know if I have time right now. I'm down to 5 minutes, so I'm gonna squeeze to get through the rest of these. But afterwards, if people have questions about shoreland and expansions, definitely talk to me, and I will do my best to cover it. So question, setback for a new animal feedlot or manure storage area from a private well, not a sensitive well. New animal, all right. George got me on that one. My question's not that well worded. Let's go with new animal feedlot. Let's just stick with the feedlot. All right, we're up to 47. All right, if they don't answer. Oh, 48. Yeah, this part drives me nuts. All right, if you're not answering, you don't get an answer. All right, 85% of you said 100 feet, and you're right. Good job. You get a cookie. All right, wells, go through the wells. Look at this. I love the fact that this checklist has everything in it. I don't have to try to go looking for these. I don't have to try to remember them. It's in the checklist. Same thing with the DWISMAs. Most of you have this layer up in your GIS, so knowing if it's in a DWISMA, drinking water supply management area, I just like saying DWISMA. All right, surface tile intakes, transferred manure, non-transferred manure. I do want to touch on this before I run out of time. So this gets back to what Wayne was talking about with the manure management plans and all that great stuff. Transferred manure, you can utilize our transferred manure management plan. That is out on the web. It is available. When you get a construction short form permit application, you have to have a manure management plan with it to be considered complete, including, let's see, including a transfer plan. So if they're transferring 100%, they need to submit the transfer manure management plan with it. You cannot write a requirement for a manure management plan into a construction short form permit. You can write a requirement for a manure management plan into an interim permit. Yes. Do we need an update? Yes. Say that again. Yeah, if project does not meet required setback, the proposed structure needs to be moved, receive a variance from DH, or the well needs to be sealed and moved prior to permitting. The question is, prior to stocking, utilizing the interim permit, can we add that as a condition of the permit to close a well or whatnot? We are dealing with Minnesota Department of Health rules, though there's a rule in ours as well about the well location. I guess you could include it, but I would probably let your Department of Health contact know that you did that if they need to close something, so they are in the loop with you with the condition, and make sure that you're not overstepping any bounds with any other Department of Health rules, is what I would do. Okay. All right, manure, let's see. A complete manure management plan checklist must be completed for each MMP and in the file, especially if you reviewed that MMP at the farm. You have to have that checklist as proof that you did that in the file. Okay. We're not going to get through the rest of these, but let me just touch on the public notice and we'll call her good, because the public notice can really mess people up as well. I did include too much information, but permitting is like that. Let me tell you, it can really, really have a lot of pieces and parts to it. All right, so vote quick. And it says, how many days must you wait prior to issuing a permit for a facility after public notice if they're over 500 animal units? And this is talking about the good neighbor notice. And I maybe should have clarified in here when you're dealing with the good neighbor notice. All right, so 60% to 20 business days, you're right. It is business days, and that can really mess people up sometimes thinking about business days to calendar days. So our notices, governmental notifications in the PowerPoint, I have the references. Yes. Kathy made a comment that federal holidays would not be counted as business days, and I believe I would agree with that. If you want to err on the side of caution, you can, count them, but if you're close, I would probably agree with that statement. I can look into it a little bit more if you'd like to. But it's business days, so if it's not a business day, I can't see counting it. Governmental notifications, 70-20, 30 days prior to construction. Those are your township and your county notifications. Good neighbor notifications, these are required in statute as well as in rule. 20 business days prior to issuance. Public meetings, they get an exemption from the EAW if they're below those thresholds. It's also required in the Minnesota State statute for public meetings. And we can touch on it if you have questions about where those are or what those are. I have them with me today. Last thing I want to say, let's get that question, is make sure if you cannot issue the permit within 15 days that you are sending an incomplete letter. I know it's a pain, but it does stop the clock for you, so use it. Use your incomplete letters. The other thing is a permit application is not considered received until you get the application. Plans and specs being received is not the start of an application. You have to have the permit application into you to be considered the start of an application, and don't hold applications for producers. Don't let them give them to you and say, I'll wait, I'll hold it for 10 days. Do not do that. When it comes into your possession, it's a date stamp and it starts the clock. Because if you hold it, the clock starts when you took that. It does not wait for the producer to bring something else in. So don't hold permit applications for farmers. All right, I'm done. All right, Tracy's question. Tracy, ask your question. I'm sorry, Richard.
They actually just stop with they're building a barn, but they close the lot. If house in the barn, they can't close the lot there. Yeah. So they got to be able to put cows in the barn. Not going to expand numbers, but can they put cows in the barn so that they close the lot?
Technically, the question was, can they put cows in the barn to close the lot to fix a pollution hazard? Yes. That's the short answer. The long answer is they have to fix the pollution hazard before they can expand. And so if they're just moving animals, I think you can write it clearly into the permit in the language to say, this is closing the open lot during when the barn is completed. You may move these animals from this lot into the barn. All right. Thank you, folks. Thank you for bearing with me.